this is a treat. We have Joshua Cooper in Santa Barbara, California. Joshua Cooper is the human rights advocate, the human rights review co-director for the United Nations. I could tell you so many things about it, but let me tell you why we're meeting today. Do you know that we have 30 human rights? The story of human rights is the drama of persistent struggle in the study advance that we can make against heavy odds. And with human rights comes peace and the theme to true freedom. Human rights, 30 human rights, which are our privilege. And when did they start, Joshua Cooper, our guest today?
Well, they started first in 1945 at the UN Charter signing and the adoption of that in San Francisco. And Eleanor Roosevelt was persistent and worked from 45 all the way through December 10th, 1948 to create that Universal Declaration of Human Rights with those 30 articles that you're discussing.
This is Joshua Cooper, and you can hear his energy and his love for the human rights that Eleanor created so many years ago. Joshua Cooper is one of those Universal Periodic Review co-director. Why is he in Santa Barbara? Tomorrow we're having an event about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. We're going to review what's working and what needs to be encouraged. And so with that, I want you to know that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights remains as relevant today as it was the day it was created in 1948, that it was proclaimed and adopted by the United Nations General Assembly. The extraordinary vision and resolve of the drafters produced a document that for the first time articulated the rights and the freedoms to which every human being is equally and inalienable right to be. You know, sometimes I say to people, do you know you have human rights? They can't name one of them. And we have 30. Why is that, Joshua? Why are they so unaware?
Well, what's important is that around the world, though, this is what they actually teach in schools. It's really important. And most people know what their rights are because they're actually demanding them and fighting for them and working to improve the life that they had. Maybe in our country, we've gotten human rights is a muscle, and our muscle has not been utilized enough. So the exciting thing is there's this universal periodic review that happens to every country every 4.5 years. So it's a great time to say, how are we doing? Is our A1C1 numbers good? Are we healthy? Are we toned? And when we look at the UPR coming up, which will be November 10th, of this year, it's a chance for us to also say what matters most to us. It's a chance for us to say what is wrong, but more importantly, what we really want, and to connect that to the rights that we have that just aren't being realized.
Aren't being realized because they're not even known by many people. You know, when I first got these little human rights booklets from the United Nations, I said, now available in 360 languages, the Declaration is the most translated document in the world. Joshua, tell me, why is that?
Well, because everyone everywhere on earth, no matter where you are, since 1945, has these rights. We're born with them. And our governments don't grant them to us. Our governments actually are duty bearers and must uphold these rights to us. So that's the sacred obligation that exists. And these 30 articles cover everything. They cover Article 24, it's the weekend, right? Right to rest and leisure, having that balance. But this is what we're doing, and what you're calling for is education. That's Article 26. So in a way, they're also a transformative toolkit to make sure that our lives are very full of the most positive things that are possible. And in a way, it's all about well-being.
It's about well-being and equality. And I remember reading Article 9. No one shall be subjected to arbitrary arrest, detention, or exile. On a worldwide basis, what a difference that could make. And so do you have people saying to you, Joshua, how am I going to report what's going on? How are we going to report what's going on with the human rights?
One of the exciting, simplest things we'll do is before April 7th, everyone individually could turn in a 5-page document, or collectively in coalitions turn in a 10-page document. So we can do that in different ways. We can do it by city, what we're looking at here in Santa Barbara. We can do it by theme, looking at those issues that you talked about of arbitrary arrest, detention. Very important that we can look at any different way that we want to slice it to be able to share it. And what's also important in the second phase, in the interaction phase, we're going to also look at the 17 global goals. We're going to call that global goals on the ground. And for that, we're going to find the best practices as we're doing with each of the 17 goals, from no poverty, zero hunger, all the way down to peace, justice, and strong institutions. And then actually look at what's not doing so well and think of 2 steps we can all take to get on that path and change the system to make sure that we secure these human rights for all people.
That's beautiful that we can make a path to secure the human rights for all people. I'm reading Article 18. Everyone has the right to the freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. This right includes freedom to change his religion or belief, and freedom of either alone or in community with others. I remember Robert being at the United Nations, and he never felt he was a Catholic, even though he was a Catholic. He went to the Buddhist, he went to the Doug Hammarskjöld place to meditate. He was always doing things that was ecumenical. Do you think that's a right number 19? No, it's 18, number 18.
Yeah, no, I've enjoyed in my life, that goes back to Franklin Delano Roosevelt's 4 freedoms. Freedom of speech, freedom of worship, freedom from fear, freedom from want. That combination of civil, political, economic, social, cultural. And it's that serenity. You know, Roosevelt knew that in 41 when he made that speech on January 6th, a much better moment of January 6th for our nation to cherish. He made that speech of freedom of speech and freedom of worship. And he knew that was important. And that we also have respect for each other's values and visions and our voices. And I'm very fortunate to assist many different ecumenical faiths at the UN, from the Uyghurs to the Khmer Krom Buddhists to the Tibetans and even the Bektashi. And so I've been able to learn from each one of those. And there's underlining all of it in religion and faith as well as rights is all the commonality that we share as humanity.
As humanity, one human being to another. Isn't that beautiful? I'm reading Article 19. Everyone has the right to freedom of opinion and expression. This right includes freedom to hold opinions without interference and to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas through media and regardless of the location. Think about that. This is why I do Peace Podcast, Joshua, because I am so lucky. Last night I was at Nancy Martin's lovely home in Santa Barbara, and you were telling us all about the periodic review of the human rights. And I said, I have to let the world know we have somebody fighting for our rights. And I shouldn't say fighting, keeping our rights front of us all. So what right do I have to interview you? This is the media, right?
Yep. So it's Article 19. There's even been a global movement and a non-governmental organization called PEN, and also Article 19. And they called it Article 19 because of the UDHR. And one of the most important points is you could see the interconnectedness of all these issues. 18 is freedom of thought. If I have freedom of thought, that's great, but then it's more of a Buddhist meditation between us. But then we have this one, freedom of media, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, so that people can watch this podcast and go, I'm going to go down to Santa Barbara and I'm going to actually participate in this UPR training, and I'm going to draft and use my other article of Article 19 to then write a report and then submit it to the UN. And then we're going to make sure when the UN is reviewing the United States that these recommendations are given. We're going to take those recommendations and make sure that after the November 10th review, next year, 1 year from now at the Human Rights Council, that these recommendations are adopted. And then we're going to work diligently for the next 4.5 years to actualize these 30 articles of the UDHR and make sure that the recommendations that people made today and last night are actually changing our public policy and improving our daily lives.
Absolutely. And you're listening to Joshua Cooper, who teaches at the University of Hawaii. He's the current director of the Hawaiian Institute of Human Rights and CEO and co-chair of the Universal Periodic Review of the Human Rights Task Force. This is a man on the move. You know, I try to get Joshua in person when I can. Well, I can't. He's so busy. He's either in an airplane or he's teaching at a class somewhere. And last night when he started to open up his well of wisdom, and I want you to realize you have a well of wisdom from the experiences that you have. We sat there and we felt like we were looking at Muhammad. Here he was with this well of wisdom just pouring out of him. How come you're so bright?
I'm very fortunate. All the work that I do to help people around the world just adds to the knowledge that I gain. And I'm also naturally curious. And I know there's so much more that I have to learn. And the whole point, too, of knowing things is in sharing it to then utilize it to then spread it so everyone can be part of the solution. We're all a bunch of solutionaries. Sometimes people just don't know where they should step in, but everyone has amazing knowledge and a lifetime of experience and has so much to share with the world.
We're encyclopedias of wisdom, and we can't lose them. Robert always said, I hope when he would interview these people in Japan or be speaking in Sardinia, I hope you don't lose the encyclopedia of wisdom that you've captured. And here's how I keep it. And he would hold up his little booklet with his pen and his paper. And he would say, every time I have an idea, I write it down. Would you think that's a good idea?
That's a great idea because it goes from idea to initiative to changing institutions.
In the idea, initiative, and changing institutions. I'm working so hard with mutually assured survival, which is why we have Peace Podcast. In case I didn't tell you this, I'm Barbara Gon Mueller, the host, and pleasure to interview these wonderful people who give you the wisdom that you can use to make your life even better and more harmonious with the human rights. Now, Joshua, I know that this review is going to happen in Santa Barbara. Where's the next one going to be?
The next one will be tomorrow. That'll be in Pasadena with the UNA chapter there. And then at UCLA and USC on Sunday. And then we'll be having events this week on Maui. I'm fortunate enough to also be the Chief Sustainability Officer for the Office of Innovation and Sustainability for the Mayor of Maui. And the youth are actually bringing together 100 youth to talk about human rights and also all the 17 global goals on the ground.
The 17 global goals on the ground. I love that phrase. We have 17 global goals, and Nancy Martin, whose home you are in right now, and beautiful artifacts from her travels as a Peace Fellow. She talks about making our city council aware that we have these global, what did you call them? Global goals on the ground?
Yep, G3.
G3, why not? It's very important that we keep our voices on the projects that we believe in, that we keep our voices strong for human rights, for the Declaration of Human Rights. And these little booklets are almost free. We give them away at our meetings. And Article 30, my favorite of all. Nothing in this declaration may be interpreted as implying for any state, group, or person any right to engage in any activity or perform an act aimed at the destruction of any of these rights, freedom from this day forward. Isn't that beautiful? It's a protection for the 30 human rights.
Yeah, and Article 29 is great too. That very much also then calls for what do we do and where do we move? Because in the end, we probably should have a World Court of Human Rights that's there that everyone can go to, the same way that we have the 10 treaty bodies, the same way that we have the Universal Periodic Review. And we see that evolution. We see the International Criminal Court. And we saw in December, I was at the International Court of Justice focusing on climate change and also the right of future generations with the case brought by Vanuatu. And what was so powerful there was it was bringing together the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, and the International Criminal Court, and seeing how both of those overlap and reinforce each other to basically realize our rights.
That is fabulous. I had Ben Ferenz on. He was 26 when he did the Nuremberg trial. And there were 3,000 criminals, and they only had 30 chairs. And he said, I will pick the 30 most guilty. And, I believe in miracles, Joshua. Like the fact that you're in Santa Barbara is a miracle to me. The fact that I can interview you on Zoom is a miracle. But when I talked to Ben Ferenz, he said the miracle that happened for me was to pick those 30 criminals and put them on trial. I couldn't have done it if somebody didn't come to me the day before the trial and hand me the journals of these criminals. Wow. And as he said to these criminals, the 30 that he picked, did you do thus and so on this day? Not guilty. He said, well, in your journal, I am reading thus and so. And it gives me chills because he was only 26 and they said, we can't do this. There's too many criminals. But he took away all of that pain of trying to find the right ones because of those journals. So I look at you as a journal of happening of what's going on now. Someday we will be saying, Joshua Cooper, thank you for bringing the awareness of the human rights and to be having a Universal Periodic Review. Joshua, where can we go to find out more about the human rights and more about you?
Well, what's important is the Universal Periodic Review, so we can look at what's been done in the past. There's been 3 cycles. I was fortunate to be the Geneva coordinator for the first one, but then the UPR task force co-chair with Mary, who focuses so greatly on right to education, but really the right to health, because health is so valuable. Those economic, social, and cultural rights are so important. The Office of High Commissioner for Human Rights, ohchr.org, is a great website to go to. Also, you can look at the UNA websites from all the local chapters, and you can also see the great work that's been done so far in the previous cycles as well with the U.S. Human Rights Network. So there's a great place to start. But what's most important is what's inside you, and you being able to focus on what rights matter most to you, what ideas you have, and then most importantly, how we can take that forward to the UN to make sure that when the US is reviewed November 10th, that your perspective is first and foremost.
So if you want to know more about the human rights, you actually could Google Declaration of Human Rights, and you will get all the lists. You can Google the 17 global goals on the ground, and you'll get those. And you can Google Joshua Cooper and find out what he has done. I couldn't stop reading about all the things that he has done. Here's the thing. When you have a passion for something, the universe supports you. Have you found that, Joshua?
I think the more you give, the more you get. And, we have great systems that were set up with the rule of law. We have so many people like Ben Friends who have been working before, and we just have to make sure that we keep breathing life into those, and then also making sure they evolve as well so that they recognize the world that we haven't always been where we should be. And so it's a great evolution, great way for people to be involved and engaged. And people, I agree with what you said, should find what their passion is and then make sure that we assist them so that they can become advocates for what matters most to them and make sure that we improve the world together.
Right back before I did our podcast day, I was talking to Sam Daly Harris, who is also on here, and he says everybody should have a call to action. What is your call to action? My call to action is to see our world at peace, and I mean peace with no wars. I mean peace in the family. One of my podcasts was about how peace in the family creates world peace. That couple has had 5,000 views, a new roadmap for peace in the family and peace on our planet. These podcasts are powerful, Joshua. What do you want the world to know, and what's your plan for our future?
Well, I think what's most important is we're focusing on human rights 2045, looking at where we'll be in 20 years on the 100th anniversary of the UN. But it starts local. It's what can you do at home, human rights, bringing human rights home. And Eleanor Roosevelt said that's where it all begins, is at home. So I fully agree that it begins there. And then what you do is just, if you think about it, we just have to ripple that out because we care so much about our families. And we just have to recognize that the whole world is just a friend you haven't met yet and a family as well. And one of the fortunate things I could say is I have been able to go in many places around the world is you're there in Fiji and you're meeting people and you have so much in common and it's people you just have never met, but they're so informed and want to be involved and very dedicated to making a difference. And what it is getting together with people, coordinating campaigns, and then changing the world to make sure it reflects the views and values that matter most.
Wow. I was in Japan, and my husband got an award in Japan, and I got up to speak and I said, "My heart is full." And I got a standing ovation for saying my heart because that's what we all have in common.
The heart
And
is the strongest, best muscle. And it also focuses on something I think we need now more than ever is everything does come down to love. And it sounds like a song, but the truth is on all the most positive points, it's love. It's love for one another, but it's also love for our planet. And Earth Day's coming up, and we have to definitely understand that that is our home, and there's only one, and we have to really think about that as a priority of taking care and protecting our planet.
you could have just summarized all my 160 podcasts with that word love because they all had a passion, they all believed in peace, and they believed that what they were doing was going to make a difference. Do you feel the same way?
I know every day because I meet people and you can see what they're doing and how they're doing it. And you brought up that aspect, and I was just reading a book on Pearl Chase, and she said it started first with your health, and then the next was home. And yesterday I stopped at a 3D printing house place where the people were so smart they used technology. It was high tech and high touch, where they could build homes out of recycled plastic. And if you can do that, then we change the dynamics where so few people are able to afford. So, in housing is a human right under the UDHR. So, it's using that framework of human rights to make sure that everyone's lives are a bit better.
Everyone's lives are a bit better. Those words are why I was born, because I believe that with peace and prosperity that the world can survive. But you said something in this last comment, when you fall in love with the planet. This is what my husband always said. If what's Dr. Robert Mueller said, when you love our world, there's no way you can harm it with wars and tragedies that aren't necessary to prove a point. And conversations are what I have with you. And Joshua, at my last little bit of few minutes here, what would you like the world to do and know in 40 years from now?
Well, you know what I loved is you described and were sharing that it reminded me, especially when we're here with the Nuclear Age Peace Foundation in Santa Barbara, Frank Kelly, and all that important work. I was in Tahiti and I won the Martin Luther King Award, and I was the youngest person to receive it in Hawaii. And I let my grandma go and give the speech because she was very influential and inspirational and could have had mom do that as well. But I was in Tahiti, and the people there didn't get the aspect of colonialism and why it's so important to have self-determination for indigenous people, because the indigenous peoples of Tahiti said we would have never in our wildest horrible moments created a weapon that would then destroy our home. And they're, of course, upset that France was doing nuclear testing in Moana Nui Akea, where I organize a lot in the Pacific. And they were saying that's the problem. You have to understand and challenge colonialism and decolonization and have a human rights based approach with self determination at the forefront, because they would have never done that. And so seeing all those aspects, it's absolutely crucial. So the Universal Declaration is important. The UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People is important. And it's great. In Maui, we have a Kanaka Maoli mayor who's focusing on housing, who's focusing on peace and prosperity. Those are all the points that we have to all do. And we can all be leaders in our own way in our communities and go from community to the capital in our countries to the global civil society and work at all three levels to make sure the world's a better place, because it's all interconnected.
It is all interconnected. I'm so proud that we're together on this planet, Joshua. I'm so proud of the work you're doing, and I'm so glad that we had this moment. I have, as I said when I started, I've been trying to track you down. I wanted to have you in person on peacepodcast.org because your inspiration inspires many people, young people, old people, all people. And the fact that you wrote the Martin Luther King Award and you had your grandmother do the speech, I love it. I love intergenerational love because my grandparents practically raised me with love, love, love. I was the love of their life. My parents were busy working and doing all those things, but my grandparents had time to hug me and kiss me and love me. And I'm sure that happened to you.
Yep. And mom is also great. And now mom and I are still going strong. And it all does begin with a strong family.
A strong family. All right, with that, I'm Barbara Gunn Mueller. I hope that you're as inspired as I am about the human rights, our rights for a place on this planet. And I hope you will join us again. And if you want to find out more, you heard Joshua Cooper give you many websites. And I want to thank you. You are the reason I do this. I do these podcasts for inspiration, for happiness and joy. And when my grandfather said at 3, Barbara, you're going to be a peacemaker, I said, I'm not sure what that means, but I have spent a life finding out. God bless you and join us again. Thanks, Joshua.
Mahalo. Thank you so much. Maluhia me kapono. Aloha.
Thank you all for joining us. Come again next week.